Hi there, and welcome to the Daily Gardener, and thank you for listening. I'm your host, Jennifer Ebling. It's February 19th. Today, we celebrate the man who introduced tulips to Holland and the botanist who was supposed to become Carl Linnaeus' son in law, but didn't. We'll also learn about the botanist who loved New Brunswick. And today's unearthed words feature words about winter and bees in winter. We grow that garden library with a book that helps you recognize elements of good garden design. And I'll talk about a garden item in high demand this time of year. And then we'll wrap things up with the birthday of a distinguished gardener and garden writer. And she backfilled Vita Sackville West as the garden columnist for The Observer. But first, let's catch up on a few recent events. Here's today's curated articles. First up is a post from Mother Earth News. This was a post for how to make a teepee for your climbing beans. They suggest using a garbage can lid, position the canes at 12, 3, 6, and 9 o'clock, and then fill in between. And then tie a string to the canes near the top. Repeat for each cane, and then lash them all together until they're secured. Listener Patricia Chandler Newport suggested putting a cane right in the center to stabilize the teepee, which I thought was a great idea. Once I was driving in South Minneapolis and I stumbled on this beautiful garden. It was in the front yard, and they had repurposed large tree branches to use as their canes for their teepees. They were gorgeous, just stunning. And I came home and did the same thing in my garden. If you'd like to read this post from Mother Earth News on how to make a teepee for your climbing beans, just search for the word teepee in the Facebook group for the show, and this post will pop right up. Then next was a post that's near and dear to my heart. It was by Dan Gill, and the post was called Protect Mature Trees from Damage During Construction Projects. I see this all the time. Beautiful old trees on properties where new homes are being constructed. And even though it's clear they want to save the tree, often they don't do a good enough job of protecting the tree, especially mature old trees. I think most people assume that the tree roots end at the tree canopy, but that's just not the case. I remember interviewing Robert Couric, a tree expert, and I learned from him that tree roots extend 2 to 3 times past the tree canopy. And here's another great takeaway. The tree roots of most trees are quite shallow. When little kids draw pictures of trees, they draw the tree roots going straight down. And I've actually talked to people who think that the root system of a tree underground mirrors what's happening with the tree above ground. But that's, again, just not the case. The root system of most trees rides along the surface of the ground. This is why, if you alter the topography on top of those tree roots by adding more soil or tons of mulch, you can actually smother the roots of the tree. In this post by Dan Gill, he too points out that the root system of trees is much shallower than most people imagine. He says the overwhelming majority of a tree's feeder roots, the roots that absorb water and minerals from the soil, are located in the upper 12 inches of the soil, that top foot of soil. You can see this when a tree blows over, and then the exposed root system is shallow and flat like a plate. This makes the root system far more prone to damage during construction than most people realize. Now, if you'd like to check out this excellent post for yourself, just search for tree in the Facebook group for the show, and this post will pop up. Great post by Dan Gill. Now, if you'd like to check out any of these curated articles for yourself, you're in luck because I share it in the listener community for the show, and it's completely free for you to join in Facebook. All you have to do is the next time you're in Facebook, just hop on up to the search bar, type in the Daily Gardener Community, and request to join. Then I'll get a notification on my phone and I'll admit you into the group. It's just that simple. Now, what you get out of this is all of the articles that I curate and share on the show will start to show up in your Facebook feed. You'll see pictures of your friends and family like you normally do, and then sprinkled in between, you'll see some occasional garden articles as I share them in the group. Then at any time, you can just hop into the group by tapping on it. You can share pictures of your garden or other posts that you find that you think are helpful. I love that. So the idea is to make it easy for you to connect with the show, to connect with other listeners of the show, and to effortlessly track down resources. So there's no need to take notes or search for links. The next time you're on Facebook, just search for the Daily Gardener Community and request to join. I'd love to meet you in the group. Here's today's brevities. Today is the birthday of the Flemish botanist and the founder of the Botanical Garden at Leiden, Charles de la Cluse, who was born on this day in 1526. Charles was an important 16th century horticulturist who, like many scientists of his time, translated his name into Latin. So Charles was also known as Carolus Clusius. Clusius is remembered as the botanist who introduced tulips to Holland. Around 1560, Clusius wrote that the first tulips appeared in Antwerp and Mechlin. A merchant had gotten a hold of some, and assuming they were a new kind of onion, he actually ate a few of the bulbs and then planted the rest. To his surprise, the onions grew into beautiful blooms. Today we know them as tulips. In 1593, after a trip to Turkey, Clusius finally obtained some tulips for himself from the Ottoman Sultan Suleiman. Clusius planted them at his botanical garden at the University of Leiden in Holland. Hoping to study their medicinal properties, he was stunned when neighbors crept into his garden, stole some of the bulbs, and sold them for ridiculous sums, and launched the Dutch tulip trade. Within decades, Leiden's tulips gave rise to the tulip mania that still fascinates garden historians to this day. Today, the tulip has become a national icon of Holland, and one of the best places to see tulips is at the Gokenhof in Lissa, and the best time is generally about halfway through April. Not surprisingly, Clusius wrote the first major book on tulips, and he also left his mark on many flowering bulbs. He named the popular Portuguese squill Scylla peruviana after a ship christened Peru, and not Peru the country. And Clusius planted the first crown imperial. One of his last major written works was a flora of Spain and Portugal that featured 233 botanical woodcuts. It was published in 1576. And the tropical genus Clusia was named by Carl Linnaeus to honor Charles de la Cluse. And today is the birthday of the Swedish English botanist and star pupil of Carl Linnaeus, Daniel Solander, who was born on this day in 1773. More than his protege, Linnaeus had hopes that Solander might become a future son in law. From there, Linnaeus hoped he'd found his successor as professor of botany at Uppsala. Linnaeus had a daughter named Lisa Stina, and although Solander had fallen for her, Linnaeus lined up an opportunity for Solander to be the chair of botany at St. Petersburg in Russia. Linnaeus was putting Solander through the same gauntlet he'd experienced before getting married. Go out and establish yourself, and then come back here and settle down. Solander took Linnaeus completely by surprise when he wrote that he'd be staying in England. Solander's letters to Linnaeus became less frequent, and Lisa Stina ended up unhappily married to a grandson of Rudbeck, the family after which Rudbeckia or Black Eyed Susans are named. Although Solander dashed Linnaeus's hopes, he did become a champion of botanical exploration, and he left his own considerable mark on the field of botany. After some time in London, Solander met Joseph Banks at the British Museum, where he was working as an assistant librarian. The two decided to partner up in Captain James Cook's first circumnavigation of the globe. People often assume that Solander was younger than Banks, since he was Banks' assistant. But in truth, Banks was 7 years younger than Solander. When the Endeavour sailed from Plymouth on August 25th of 1768, Banks was 25 and Solander was 32. The two botanists worked well together. They collected some 800 new plants on their trip. Captain Cook honored the two men by christening Botany Bay after, quote, the great quantity of plants Mr. Banks and Dr. Solander found in this place. And the outer ends of Botany Bay are Cape Solander in the southwest and Cape Bank in the northeast. From Botany Bay alone, Solander and Banks found acacias, eucalyptus, grevilleas, mimosa, and banksia, which of course was named after Joseph Banks. Unlike many botanists of his time, during his 3-year trip around the world, Solander did not send a single one of his discovered specimens to Linnaeus. Solander's sole devotion was to Banks. As for Linnaeus, he could often be heard referring to Solander, the pupil that got away, as, quote, the ungrateful Solander. When the Endeavour returned to England, many people forget that half of the original crew, some 32 souls, had died on the historic voyage. Miraculously, both Solander and Banks survived, and they would go on to explore Iceland together in their next voyage. At home in England, Solander became Banks' personal secretary and librarian. In 1780, Solander agreed to help the Duchess of Portland with her enormous collections. Sadly, his work was cut short when he died from a brain aneurysm in 1782 at the age of 46. And today is the birthday of the first professor of botany at Smith College, William Francis Genong, who was born on this day in 1864. Genong's family were famous chocolate makers. In fact, today, Genong Chocolate is Canada's oldest family-operated chocolate company. Of course, William was supposed to go into the family business as well, but instead he lost his heart to natural sciences like botany, history, and cartography. Today, the Ganong name is synonymous with the Canadian province of New Brunswick. It's not only where the chocolate company is located, it's also where Ganong did the majority of his work. Every year for 50 years, Ganong would return to New Brunswick to conduct his research. In 2016, the historian Ronald Rees wrote a biography of Ganong. The following year, Ganong was honored for his contributions to the history and geography of New Brunswick. A statue of Ganong was erected on the banks of the St. Croix River, a place he especially loved. The statue's creator remarked, "He'll be looking up the St. Croix River," which is quite appropriate. In unearthed words, here are some words about winter and also bees in winter. This first one's from Jared Kentz, the American author of This Book Is Not for Sale. When I was young, I loved summer and hated winter. When I got older, I loved winter and hated summer. Now that I'm even older and wiser, I hate both summer and winter. And here's a quote from the American naturalist and writer John Burroughs. "It is the life of the crystal, the architect of the flake, the fire of the frost, the soul of the sunbeam. This crisp winter air is full of it." And here's a line from the American naturalist and writer Hal Borland. "No winter lasts forever. No spring skips its turn." And here's a famous line about winter from an unknown author. "Winter is the season in which people try to keep the house as warm as it was in the summer when they complained about the heat." And here's a verse about bees in winter from the American naturalist and writer John Burroughs. "The queen bee alone survives. You never see her playing the vagabond in fall. At least I never have. She hunts out a retreat in the ground and passes the winter there, doubtless in a torpid state, as she stores no food against the inclement season." And here's a verse from The Humble Bee, a poem by the American poet and writer Ralph Waldo Emerson. "Seeing only what is fair, sipping only what is sweet, thou dost mock at fate and care, leave the chaff and take the wheat. When the fierce northwestern blast cools sea and land so far and fast, thou already slumberest deep. Woe and want thou canst outsleep. Want and woe, which torture us, thy sleep makes ridiculous." It's time to grow that garden library with today's book, Gardens in Detail by Emma Roos. The subtitle of this book is 100 Contemporary Designs. Do you ever wish you had an expert who could help you analyze the elements of a successful garden? Well, in this book, Emma Roos is that person. Emma quickly defines the 7 principles that she feels makes gardens go from meh to wow. First is location, the spirit of a place. Second is unity, using themes to unite the different components in a garden. third is simplicity, using a fixed amount of complexity, a limited palette, to keep small spaces interesting and large spaces manageable. Fourth is balance. Garden elements should have the same visual weight in a garden. Fifth is proportion, or the scale of elements. Number six is rhythm and repetition, reintroducing elements over and over to promote even more unity. And finally, focal points to enhance views and to encourage people to move through the garden. Each of the gardens featured in Emma's book is reviewed over 4 pages, which offer photos, general information, a brief essay about the garden, highlighted elements, and a bulleted list of successful design elements. That's a feature I find especially helpful. If you're the kind of gardener who draws inspiration from garden images or garden tours, this book is for you. More than anything, Emma's book is an idea book, a banquet of successfully designed gardens and unique garden elements to inspire you to dream bigger dreams than emperors, as the saying goes, about the plans of gardeners. This book came out in 2014. You can get a used copy of Gardens in Detail by Emma Roos and support the show using the Amazon link in today's show notes for under $15. And here's today's great gift for a gardener. It's the Gardman 4-tier mini greenhouse. It's 27 inches long, 18 inches wide, and 63 inches high. And you can get it on Amazon for $37.86. This item is a featured Amazon choice, and it's also on Amazon Prime, which means you get free shipping. It's lightweight and easy to assemble. No tools are required. It's waterproof, bug-resistant, and portable. The polyethylene cover is clear, it's removable, and you can roll up the zippered door for easy access to your plants. As I mentioned, there are 4 tiers for your plants, flowers, or seedlings. It's perfect for small backyards or for homes where space is an issue. And it's perfect for gardeners who are looking for something to stack their seedlings on. For additional security, you can use zip ties to attach the frame to the shelves, and there are tabs on the back so that you can fasten it to a wall or to a patio railing. This little greenhouse is put together with tubular steel, and the frame assembles in minutes. You can enhance this little greenhouse by adding a combination of grow lights, a thermometer, heating mats, fans, and so forth. And if something should happen to the cover, you can order a replacement cover separately from Gardman. Gardman's motto is "Bring your garden to life." And you certainly can do that with this very functional, small footprint, 4-tier mini greenhouse. I've put a link to it in today's show notes, and you can support the show and use that Amazon link to get the 4-tier mini greenhouse for $37.86. Finally, here's something sweet to revive the little botanic spark in your heart. Today is the birthday of the distinguished gardener and writer Frances Perry, who was born on this day in 1907. Born Frances Mary Everett, her mother, Isabella, took a 10-year-old Francie to see the Chelsea Flower Show. The experience was etched in her mind and instilled a love for flowers in Frances's heart. Frances was also influenced by her famous neighbor, Edward Augustus Bowles, who went by Gussie with his friends and family. Gussie was a plantsman and a writer. He had a large garden featuring a series of garden rooms, and he also held a position on the Council of the Royal Horticultural Society. Frances would pick wildflowers and then bring them to Gussie for identification. The two had a special bond. When Frances got older, Gussie recommended her to the town's nurseryman, Amos Perry Jr. The Perry Nursery was started by Amos Perry Sr., and the Perrys were famous for their water and waterside gardening. And Frances immediately loved working at the Perry's Hardy Plant Farm. In a short while, she was running the aquatic plant department and creating water garden exhibits for the Chelsea Flower Show. Amos Jr. had produced something else of interest for Frances, his son, a fern specialist named Gerald Alfred Amos Perry, who Frances described as a brilliant plantsman and propagator. The two were married in 1930 when Frances was just 22 years old, and in 3 years they had two sons, just 18 months apart. In April of 1945, Frances and Gerald's older boy, Marcus, then just 13 years old, was killed after being hit by a lorry. In a 1966 column, Frances wrote about an oriental poppy that kept an upright habit, and it had huge orange scarlet flowers in July and August. It was named Marcus Perry. In another column that was featured in April of 1990, Frances shared a tip about using poppies as cut flowers. It was something Gussie had taught her long ago. She wrote, his solution was to take a large jug of very hot water into the garden late in the evening, and then cut any poppy buds which had straightened up from their normal bent position and started to show color. These were plunged practically up to their necks in the jug, and then taken indoors and left until the next day to be arranged in more suitable vases. In 1954, Gussie died from a heart attack. It was May, springtime, and his ashes were scattered in his favorite part of the garden, the rock garden. The 1960s brought tremendous highs and lows for Frances. In 1964, her husband Gerald died. Then, 2 years later, in 1966, Frances was picked to be Vita Sackville West's backfill as the gardening writer for The Observer. In addition to her column, over her long career, Frances wrote nearly 20 gardening books. As with her first job at the nursery, water gardening was still considered her unique topic of expertise. Frances was dedicated to horticulture, and she experienced great success in her career. Yet she didn't care for pandering. In 1968, Frances became the first woman to be elected to the Council of the Royal Horticultural Society. A year earlier, a controversy about the council not having any women had bubbled to the surface when the chair indicated that he didn't think any women existed that could meet the council's requirements. When Frances was elected, she challenged the council by writing, "If you want me because I am a woman, the answer is no. If you want me because of anything I have done in horticulture, the answer is yes. At the age of 70, Frances married Robert Edwin Hay, who went by Roy. Roy was a widower, a fellow horticulturist, journalist, and broadcaster. Frances was 3 years older than him. For a dozen years, Roy and Frances made a lovely pair. A lifelong gardener, Roy's father had been a royal estate gardener. Like Francis, when Roy was a boy, his father took him to see the Chelsea Flower Show. After that first visit, Roy attended every show for the next 65 years. And Francis and Roy shared another similarity. They both won the Victoria Medal of Honor, an honor awarded to British horticulturists by the Royal Horticultural Society. Roy won in 1970, and Francis won in 1971. After Roy died in 1989, Frances went to live with her younger son. In December of that same year, she wrote an editorial called Sowing Seeds of Thoughts on a Cold Winter's Day. Frances was 82, a widow for the second time, and you could see that life's toll had wormed its way into her writing. Yet she faced it head on. Frances began, "There is nothing static about a garden. All gardeners know this and are constantly devising different features. Yet it's easy to let sentiment or inertia spare plants that have long since passed their prime. Too often, a design suited to younger gardeners sticks, even though age has made it more and more difficult to manage. On a cold winter's day, when there's not much we can usefully undertake in the garden, it's worthwhile sitting down to some constructive thinking. Which trees and shrubs have become old, misshapen, and really rather unproductive?" Over the next 3 years, Frances would write only a handful of articles. She was slowing down. Frances retired after 26 years with The Observer in May of 1992. Anna Pavard was her backfill. Almost 18 months later, Frances passed away and went to that big garden in the sky. Thanks for listening to The Daily Gardener, and remember, for a happy, healthy life, garden every day. The Daily Gardener is produced weekdays in lovely Maple Grove, Minnesota. You can find complete show notes over at thedailygardener.org, and be sure to share the show with your garden friends. You can find The Daily Gardener on all your favorite social media, Instagram, Twitter, and Pinterest, and of course, Facebook. While you're over at Facebook, don't forget to join the Daily Gardener community. Just search for these 3 words, Daily Gardener Community. The group will pop right up and then request to join. Finally, I want to thank my team at Podfly Productions, where my fabulous editor is Eric Begay. Have a great day in the garden, and we'll see you tomorrow.